Hello, friends. Politics often looks like a field of conspiracies. For some, it's the Jewish lobby. For others, it's the Anglo-Saxon master plan. But what do you think? Is the world really that simple? From what I've observed, most of my viewers are mature, thoughtful people who understand the complexity of global processes and don't fall into conspiracy thinking. Yet, there are always some who find it easier to tie events to the idea of hidden masterminds rather than deal with the messy reality. That's why these versions reappear over and over again. Some talk about a supposed project called the New Khazaria on the territory of Ukraine. Others believe that today's global turbulence is nothing but the result of an Anglo-Saxon plot. Today, we'll focus on the first of these theories, the myth of the New Khazaria. Where did it come from? Why did the Khazars become such a convenient symbol? What role Jews play in this story? And, most importantly, why myths like this are created in the first place. Khazaria, more precisely the Khazar Khaganate, holds a special place in historical memory. It was a major state formation from the 7th to the 10th century, controlling vast territories stretching from the Caspian to the Black Sea. It stood at the crossroads of trade routes and influenced its neighbors, including the early Slavic principalities. But here's the real question. When conspiracy theorists speak of a Jewish plot, why do we hear New Khazaria rather than any other ancient state in Eastern Europe? After all, these lands once hosted Scythians, Sarmatians, Kievan Rus, and the Golden Horde. The answer is simple. In Khazaria, something unusual happened. In the 8th and 9th centuries, part of its ruling elite converted to Judaism. For historians, this is a complicated and not fully understood episode. But for conspiracy theorists, it's the perfect excuse. In their logic, the equation is straightforward. Khazars, Jewish elite, therefore, a Jewish state. Of course, the reality was far more complex. The majority of the Khazar population practiced paganism, Christianity, or Islam. Judaism was confined primarily to a portion of the ruling class, and even there, not universally. But for mythology, one historical detail is enough. One fact from the distant past is turned into proof that Jews once had a state on these lands and now supposedly want to rebuild it. But why Jews? Why, in so many of the critical moments of recent world history, do Jews keep reappearing at the center of attention? For centuries, Jews lived in the diaspora, scattered across different lands. They maintained their religion, language, and traditions, which made them stand out as a distinct community within other societies. Unlike many other ethnic and religious groups, Jewish communities tended to be more closed, avoiding assimilation and rarely welcoming outsiders into the family. This helped them preserve their identity and survive together in difficult conditions. But at the same time, it fueled suspicion and distrust from the surrounding populations. That's how legends formed. During the plague, Jews were accused of poisoning wells. During economic crises, they were accused of usury and greed. During religious conflicts, they were accused of killing Christ. None of these accusations had factual basis, but they fit a universal scheme. Something bad happened. It must be their fault. Paradoxically, the variability of Jewish communities to endure persecution only strengthened the myth of their hidden power. If they didn't disappear under centuries of pressure, then, so the logic goes, they must have special mechanisms of influence. On that ground, the stereotype of the all-powerful Jew was born. There was another factor. In medieval Europe, the Catholic Church prohibited Christians from lending money with interest. Jewish communities, however, weren't bound by this rule. They filled the niche of moneylenders. This made them both visible and indispensable, but also unpopular. Any debtor in times of crisis could quickly turn their creditor into an enemy, and popular consciousness easily generalized. If Jews lend money, then Jews control the economy. From there, the cliché developed. Jews control the money, therefore they control everything. Thus, two stereotypes crystallized. First, Jews run the money. Second, Jews are all-powerful. These cliches became deeply rooted in mass consciousness and proved to be very convenient tools for politicians. Throughout the centuries, from the Middle Ages to modern times, the Jewish question has been used as a screen behind which rulers and elites hide their own mistakes and weaknesses. One classic example is the infamous Protocols of the Elders of Zion. This forgery was created by the secret police of the Russian Empire in the early 20th century. Its purpose was simple: to explain away revolutionary unrest not as a result of poverty, repression, or lack of reforms, but as the product of a secret Jewish conspiracy. The text was presented as a plan by Jewish elders to take over the world. To make it sound more convincing, propagandists highlighted the Jewish ancestry of certain leaders. For instance, Vladimir Lenin had a Jewish grandmother, and this fact was used as proof that Bolshevism was a Jewish project. But of course, this ancestry had nothing to do with Lenin's worldview. His ideology was shaped in Marxist circles, and the revolution itself was the result of the deep crisis of the Russian Empire, not some secret directive. The fraud was exposed almost immediately. In 1921, the Times in London published an investigation showing that the protocols were nothing more than a plagiarism of a French satire from the 19th century. In 1935, a court in Bern officially declared them a forgery. And yet, the myth had already taken root. The book spread around the world, used both by Nazis and by anti-Semitic movements in other countries. Why? Because the myth was simply more convenient than the truth. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? The scheme is exactly the same as today. When the Nazis came to power in Germany, they quickly picked up the old anti-Semitic myths. From the protocols to accusations of financial conspiracies, Jews became the universal explanation for all of Germany's troubles: the defeat in World War I, the economic crisis, political instability. Anti-Semitism wasn't just propaganda. It was a mobilizing tool. It unified the masses, provided a scapegoat, and prepared the ground for repression and, ultimately, the Holocaust. The Nazi example showed that the Jewish card works powerfully as a tool of political manipulation. Modern versions of the new Khazaria theory are direct descendants of these older traditions. Take one historical episode: the Khazar elite's adoption of Judaism. Combine it with modern events: the war in Ukraine, Israel's role in global politics, Zelensky's Jewish origin. Overlay it with the old stereotype: Jews control everything. And you get a neat, seemingly logical myth that explains today's reality. In truth, of course, it explains nothing. The new Khazaria narrative is not a new idea at all. It's a recycled anti-Semitic construct. There's an enemy, there's a secret plan, there's a simple explanation for complex events. In times of war and crisis, such a narrative is particularly convenient. It removes responsibility from real players, directs public anger at others, and creates the illusion of a clear picture of the world. That's why the emphasis on Zelensky's ethnicity is so important in this propaganda. He was elected by Ukrainians in democratic elections. His policies reflect the pressures of Ukrainian society, international alliances, and the harsh realities of war. Reducing all that to his Jewish background is not analysis, it's manipulation. Why do these myths live on? Because they are useful, both for propaganda and for mass psychology. For propaganda, they're priceless. They don't need documentation. They work through repetition and emotional impact. And most importantly, they mobilize people faster than any dry analysis. For the masses, they're convenient. Real causes of war are complex. Competition for territory, resources, influence, and security. Explaining each crisis is hard. But the idea of a hidden plan is simple, emotional, and fits into familiar stereotypes. That's why the new Khazaria myth is alive today. This myth is especially popular in today's Russia. It's convenient for the authorities because it shifts responsibility away from politicians and institutions. When the economy weakens, when the war drags on, when the crisis deepens, It's easier to say that a secret Jewish lobby is behind everything than to admit to governance failures. In this sense, the new Khazaria is the perfect screen. It provides an enemy and justifies the authorities at the same time. Instead of dealing with reality, people are told they are fighting an eternal conspiracy. The narrative also has an external dimension. It allows Russia to portray the war in Ukraine not as aggression, but as a liberation struggle against someone else's plan. This framing resonates with those abroad who are already predisposed to conspiracy thinking. For them, the picture of Jews plotting again feels both familiar and emotionally convincing. This logic is not limited to New Khazaria. The same pattern applies to the popular myth that Russia is ruled by a Jewish elite. In reality, the Russian elite is multi-ethnic, including Russians, Tatars, Armenians, Jews, and many others. But for conspiracy theorists, details don't matter. They want a single culprit, and the Jewish label is historically recognizable and emotionally powerful. This is why the logic is so dangerous. It turns real complexities of power, clans, interests, resources, ideologies, into caricatures. It replaces analysis with stereotypes, but precisely for that reason, it is so attractive to the public. It explains easily, provides an enemy, and removes the need to think deeply. And here's the key point. These proofs don't survive on their own. They are always fueled by political interest. Their survival depends on how useful they are to elites. For authorities, it's convenient to say, if there's a crisis, it's not corruption, not mistakes, not war, it's the secret lobby or foreign elites. This trick has been used in the Middle Ages, in the 20th century, and it's still being used today. So, let's sum up. The legend of the new Khazaria is not analysis. It's not a real geopolitical project. It's a continuation of a centuries-old tradition of seeking simple explanations for complex processes. In the Middle Ages, Jews were blamed for plagues and famines. Later, they were accused of causing revolutions and financial crises. In the 20th century, the protocols and Nazi propaganda turned those accusations into political tools. Today, the same logic is revived in Russian narratives. All problems come from foreign masters. Zelensky is just a puppet. Ukraine is not a sovereign state, but a staging ground. Strip away the emotions, and you see a different picture. The real causes of war are much more complicated. Control over territory, resources, influence, and security. Conspiracy theories are convenient precisely because they hide this reality. That's why, whenever we hear about the new Khazaria or a Jewish plot, we should understand. It's not a description of reality. It's a convenient myth. One that was born in the Middle Ages, grew new layers in the 19th and 20th centuries, and has adapted to today's political agenda. And that is why it still works, as a tool to justify war and distract from real problems. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If you value analysis without labels and myths, support this channel. Your likes, comments, and even symbolic support help me find the time and energy to keep making videos that go deeper than conspiracy theories.